All right, today we're jumping into a really old story, an ancient fable from Aesop, actually. But, and this is the cool part, it holds this incredibly powerful, super practical lesson for how we can tackle our biggest challenges right here, right now. So, let's kick things off with a feeling I'm pretty sure we've all had. You know that feeling? When you're up against a problem that doesn't just feel like a hurdle, it feels like a giant, solid brick wall. Yeah, think about that for a second. When you're staring down a goal that just seems way too big or too far off, just totally out of reach, what's your first move? Honestly, that question alone can just make you freeze up, right? But the good news is there's a much better way to look at it. And that better way comes from a super old story, one from Aesop's Fables, that gives this brilliant, timeless answer to that exact question. All right, let's get into it. So picture this. Our story kicks off in a pretty bleak world. We're talking major scarcity. The sun's just baking everything, the ground is all cracked and dry, and the stakes? They're literally life and death. And then we meet our hero, a crow. And this poor guy is just on the absolute edge of exhaustion. He's basically a stand-in for any of us when we're facing some huge, urgent need and there's just no clear solution anywhere. Then, out of nowhere, a little glimmer of hope. He spots a pitcher, and hey, there's water at the bottom. But, and there's always a but, right? Here's the catch. This pitcher is a fixed, solid obstacle. It's tall, its neck is super narrow, and there's just no way he can get his beak down to that life-saving water. So, what does he do? He tries everything. He pecks at it, he tries to push it over, but nothing. It won't budge. And he just hits rock bottom. This is that moment, the one, that crisis point we've all felt, where just giving up feels like the only sane thing to do. But, and this is the whole point of the story, it's right there, in that moment of absolute despair, that this flash of brilliance hits him. A complete 180-degree shift in how he's thinking about the problem. He realizes he has to stop fighting it head-on.
See, instead of trying to break the pitcher, the crow has this light bulb moment. What if he can change the conditions inside it? So he finds a single, small pebble. He drops it in. And what happens? The water level comes up. Just a tiny, tiny bit. So he does it again, and again, and again. Just one small, methodical, repeatable action.
And right there, that's the genius of it. This is where we get to the real wisdom of the fable. Because it wasn't just about a thirsty bird. It was about two completely different ways of thinking about any problem. Look at this comparison. On one side, you've got the brute force approach, right? Trying to break the obstacle, shaking the pitcher, it just wastes energy and ultimately leads to despair. But on the other side, you've got this clever adjustment. Working with the obstacle, using the resources you have around you, in this case pebbles, and that's what leads to success. The crow's genius was realizing he had to jump from that first column over to the second. And this whole idea has a name, of course, incremental progress. It's this profound, yet simple principle that a huge, impossible-seeming task can be beaten. How? By breaking it down into a bunch of small, manageable, repeatable actions. And psychologically, this is a game changer. Every little win, every tiny rise in that water level, it builds momentum. It keeps that feeling of being overwhelmed at bay. So, the big shift, the really crucial point here is this. The crow stopped fighting the pitcher. The pitcher was the obstacle he couldn't change. Instead, he started working with the physics of the situation. He realized the water level was something he could influence. He totally shifted his focus from the thing he couldn't move to the little things he could.
Okay, so this is way more than just a cute story about a bird, right? It's basically a practical playbook for our own lives. So, how do we actually apply this strategy today?
Just take a look at this. We all have our own pitchers, our own giant problems. Maybe for you, it's a daunting savings goal. Well, what are your pebbles? Small, consistent, daily deposits. Or maybe it's an interpersonal thing, a really broken relationship. Your pebbles could be small, regular acts of kindness. At work, you've got a massive, complex project. Your pebbles are those tiny, distinct tasks you chip away at every single day. But, trying to use this strategy in real life means you've got to be aware of the pitfalls. And here's the biggest one, by far. Giving up when the first few efforts don't seem to do anything. It is so tempting to get discouraged when you drop in a few pebbles and the water level barely budges. You fall right back into that despair. But the real mental trick is to stop looking for that one big immediate result and instead start valuing the simple act of showing up and dropping the pebble, day after day.
And what's really fascinating is that the wisdom in this story goes even deeper than just being a good life hack. It actually taps into some really fundamental principles of science and how the world literally works.
I mean, at its very core, the story is a perfect ancient example of what we now call Archimedes' principle. It's all about displacement. The crow didn't need a physics degree, right? He just had to watch what happened. Every single pebble he dropped created a real, measurable, and permanent change. Think about that. None of his effort was ever wasted.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? Greatness is rarely achieved in one dramatic moment, but in the tireless, intelligence, accumulation of daily, small efforts. We're so conditioned to look for that one dramatic moment, that one giant leap. But the truth, the profound truth this story teaches us, is that real success is almost always about the patient, smart accumulation of small efforts over and over again.
All right, so what does this all mean for you, right now? Let's boil it all down to the one thing you need to take away from this ancient piece of wisdom. You got to remember this. The difference between despair and victory, it's often just a handful of pebbles. When you're staring down some huge, intimidating problem, the answer is almost always smaller and simpler than you think. It's not about finding some magical hammer to smash the problem. It's about finding that first pebble.
So to really put this into action, you've got to adopt the mindset of the crow. Be resourceful, be patient, be methodical. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed by the size of the picture. Just focus all your energy on one thing, finding and dropping that next pebble.
And that really brings us to the final and most important question for you. What is the first pebble you're going to drop today? Seriously, stop struggling against the things you can't change. Take a second right now and identify your biggest challenge, your picture. And then ask yourself, what is the one small, simple thing I can do right now to start raising the water level? That is your first pebble. Now go find it.